not everyone can perceive what is occurring. Not everyone has the same insights, the same wisdom, the same clarity in the mind, the same discernment as you do, perhaps. And there's no point belittling people or ridiculing people or putting people down because they don't think the same as you. You know, we've been dragging into this Orwellian way of living and so on, and people have the lucidity to see it, but a lot of people don't. And there's this reaction of fear, and other people need to wake up and think the same as I do, as the awake people do. Well, if we actually really contemplate that for even a short amount of time, it becomes obvious that our intention there is that other people should think the same as we do. And that's an extremely egotistical outlook and motivation, because it's denying free will. That if everyone must or should think the same as us, then you're basically refusing or denying that person's free will and essentially that person's evolutionary journey to actually perhaps arrive at the same conclusions as what you do, or perhaps not. But free will is one of the rules of the universe, and you are engaging in whatever spiritual practices or activism or whatever it is you feel called to do as part of your personal mission, your soul mission. But you're more having this detached attitude to the outcome of that, which is a far more evolved and more centered and balanced place to come from. So what it means is that you take the course of action you feel called to, you attempt to, with good intentions, you have this state of aparigraha, like this detachment, that you are not basically obsessing over the effects or the results of your actions. And you'll save yourself a lot of grief, a lot of frustration, a lot of anger, which, as I said earlier, it's fear-based. And when you can see that in your own psyche, it's a very powerful wake-up call that even though my intentions are perhaps mixed, there's a component or there's an aspect of that is fear-based. And so when we take this out of the equation, or the reaction or the outcome, we're much more in a neutral place. And it's actually a state of deep empowerment, because we do what we can, we take the course of action that we take, and then the effects of that is not in our control. That is not in our sphere of influence. We don't get to decide the outcome, which is actually, when you process this, it's actually a relief. It means that we don't have to worry about that side of the equation. We're trying to have this accountability, this selflessness, that's what the motivation truly is, not to be right, to be the correct one, to know better than others, to be more advanced than other people, to be more evolved than other people. This is just another manifestation of the ego. And if you look at it very carefully, the attempt to get other people to think the way that you do is the same underlying motivation of the groupthink, of the mass formation that we saw in the earlier years during the pandemic in this decade. It's just a different version of that, actually. So it actually means that there are potential situations where one person is not as more evolved than the collective, the hive mind in this. It's just that it's a different version of the same level of consciousness. Now, this is not a black and white scenario. There are obviously shades of grey, but it can be very powerful reflection, contemplation to consider your deepest motivation and so on, and your deepest, are you attached to the outcome? Are you trying to prove other people wrong? Are you coming from a place of hurt where you've been mocked or ridiculed for your own perception of reality, which, let's be clear about this, it can be objectively correct. And that's an important thing to understand, is that some of the things that we're talking about here in the context of this video, they're not subjective, they're objective. That you did actually know what the truth was. You did actually have a higher state of consciousness in your window to the world. But how, at an egotistical level, do you relate to that inner knowing? And that's the real question for all of us on these themes, is that do we do this with an attitude of grace and humility and dignity? Or do we come from a place of, I told you so, The challenge is, can you go to the next level now and be more detached and more compassionate with people who are ignorant? Because the reality is that a lot of these people, they are simply not on the journey of awakening. And if you had asked me 2-3 years ago, I would have been much more optimistic about that these people would actually, it would take longer. Some of them, absolutely. But some of them at this point, I've got to say, there is no way. And it's largely, at least in part for many of them, because of pride. And this test, spiritual test to get to a high state of consciousness, which we're all undergoing this process of evolution, regardless of who we are and what we believe on this planet. Pride is one of the big things that we must overcome. And especially now that can you show like the universe, can you embody this more compassionate attitude? It's not easy. And it perhaps doesn't, you may waver, it might not be all the time, but that's at least the goal.